Hello, all you lovely people that are trying to make a positive impact in the world. Welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the soon to be released medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times. Thus, the name Repeatedly Dead Fred, because that's what I was. On today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Christine Errico to talk with us about her personal journey and her overcoming adversity and developing resilience. And I'll just toss it over to her. Hi, Christine. Thanks for so much for being on.
Hi, Fred. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you today.
Yeah. From what I've read so far in our brief conversation before I hit record, you've been through a lot. And I like sharing these stories because other people can take inspiration from you. And even if they don't have the exact same story, they can use you as a model to, fight through things or learn to fight through things and come out on top. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Absolutely, yes. So I was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. And what that basically means is that my lip was not properly formed during fetal development. So when I was born, there was a big gap from both sides of my upper lip where my nostrils are, and my nose was not properly formed. It also extended into my palate, where my palate was wide open and not closed. If you feel your palate, you have that nice smooth surface. I don't have that. I have actually a seam that goes down the middle of my palate where they did close it, and it's now mostly permanently closed. I have a small, tiny hole in my palate, but for the most part, it's closing. As you can see, your listeners, if they're not watching video, can't see, but I'll describe it like you see that I have scars on my upper lip that actually come down from my nostril to my lip where they closed the lip because it was open at birth. So I had about 20, a little bit more than 20 surgeries throughout my life. My first surgery is when I was about 2 or 3 months old. I really don't remember. And my
Mhm.
last surgery was in my late 20s. I've had multiple bone grafts, skin grafts, dental implants, extensive speech therapy, plastic surgery to make the lip more pliable, add some muscle, make it more functional so I can eat and talk. And of course, it comes with the emotional issues, the bullying, the self-esteem, and learning to overcome the adversity, dealing with the surgeries, medical trauma, and all those other things.
Okay, so if we can go back to the bone graft and the skin graft, where
Mhm.
does the bone and the skin come from? Is it your
That's a
own?
great question. So the bone actually comes from the hip, and because I had
Mhm.
two bone grafts, they took it from either side of my hip. My first bone graft is when I was 6 years old. My second one was when I was about 25, 26, maybe even a little bit later. That was for the dental implant. So the bone, they take it from the hip and they implant it in my upper jaw because I didn't have any bone structure. Because when I was born, the upper lip never formed, neither did the jaw, the upper jaw, or the tooth line where the teeth grow in. So they had to put the bone there to actually try to help give it some shape and give it some structure.
So that must have been very difficult recovering from two distinct surgeries at the same time. Like one would be really, really hard, but two
Mhm.
is
It was very hard. I remember as a child, 6 years old, the bone graft is a very vivid memory for me because it was incredibly painful. They wanted me
Mhm.
to get up and walk within the day, within 24 hours of the surgery. And it was so painful. The stitches, the, bone removal, just the trauma to the hip area. And I remember not wanting to walk and the nurses pushing me to. As an adult, when I had the second bone graft, it was a little bit more challenging because by then I'm used to independence, moving around, and here I am kind of limping around on crutches. Not to mention that I was recovering from the oral surgery where they put the bone in the jaw. I had no upper teeth because they removed them in preparation of the implant. So it was like a double whammy, as you mentioned. I felt like a complete monster. I had no teeth. I couldn't eat. I was in pain from the stitches in my mouth, pain from the stitches and recovering from the hip, walking around on crutches. It was very, very difficult.
so are there any negative implications for your hips because you've had those surgeries, or are you just, pretty much back to normal?
I'm pretty much back to normal. And contrary to what I think most of us think a bone graft is, they don't actually remove the bone from the hip. What they do is they cut into the bone and they remove the middle part, the cartilage and the
Mhm.
all the stuff that makes up the bone. So it's actually like a paste. What they do is they kind of, for lack of a better word, if you think of scooping out a cantaloupe or a melon, where you just get like a,
Yeah.
you can pour out the guts. That's really what it is. There's some pictures on the internet, and they just go and they cut open the bone, they get the middle part, the bone marrow, all of that. Then they mix it in with some plasma, your own plasma, your own blood, to create a paste that they pack in the upper jaw area. And medical technology, the hope is that that bone paste melds with your own cells, your own immunity, and it creates new bone. Unfortunately for me, what happened with my second bone graft when I had the implants, it did what they call osteointegrated. The bone graft did not take, my body reabsorbed it, and they didn't have enough bone to do the implants. You can imagine my devastation after 6 months of recovery, waiting until they can find it, they can insert the post for the implants. They tell me that they couldn't, the bone graft was a failure, not because of anything I did, but just
Hmm.
because my body was not cooperating. They actually had to reconfigure and redesign how they were going to insert the implants in my mouth using the remaining bone I had on the sides of my teeth, and then creating kind of a bridge across the front. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of medical insight into how they do a bone graft.
That's pretty fascinating. If you think in like construction or something, if they're pouring cement or making a foundation, they have to have a mold, and then they
Mhm.
pour it, you know, essentially your cantaloupe scoopings, you know, into a mold, and it's got something physical to hold it in place. But for you, there's nothing like that, it seems.
Right. They just had the empty space in my upper jaw where the bone would normally be. And, the first bone graft I had when I was 6 years old eventually dissolved. So they tried to pack it into that empty space. But again, the second time, my body wasn't having it.
Hmm. So, but are there any more of those planned, or you're pretty much as far as you can go?
Fortunately, no more surgeries planned. As far as I can go, I had these dental implants, knock on wood, for almost 20 years now. They've
Hmm.
been very, very stable. I get regular dental checkups. That's so important. Proper oral hygiene is really critical because I don't want to get any infections, especially with the implants.
Right.
So I get them checked out, make sure if there's any minor issues, they get taken care of immediately. And hopefully I'm done with the surgeries for the rest of my life because I've had enough for many lifetimes.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, could you um, tell the audience a little bit about what causes
Mhm.
the clefts?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So doctors and medical professionals have no idea yet what causes a cleft lip or a cleft palate. It's either genetic or it could be from environmental factors. Obviously, maybe smoking, maybe just something in the area, but that's not even proven. It is known that certain medications, certain anti-seizure medications like topiramate, has been known to cause cleft lip and palate. It could be from a lack of vitamins, specifically a lack of
Hmm.
folic acid during the mother for pregnancy. But the only known factor is obviously the anti-seizure medication, which is easy enough to address. Just don't
Hmm.
prescribe it to a pregnant woman. Folic acid, pregnant women do now make sure they have enough folic acid. But even then, that's not a guarantee. That's not an assurance that baby is not going to have a cleft. I've known some women that have done all the right things, no smoking, no medications, no sufficient folic acid, and they still
Hmm.
have a cleft. In some cases, it can be genetic. And even then, I have a younger sister. She doesn't have a cleft. She's unaffected. But I also know people, a set of twins, identical twins who have a cleft, and identical twins who do not have a cleft. I know
Hmm.
some people, it was passed on from father to daughter, or from mother to daughter, mother to son, and then some people weren't. For me, nobody in my extended family on my mother or my father's side ever had a cleft as far back as I think 3 or 4 generations. So it's really
Mhm.
hard to say specifically.
Wow. So you won the lottery on this.
Unfortunately, I did, yes.
So I'm imagining that um, on the mental side of things, the mental health side, emotional, and all those nice components, this has been like a very, very difficult journey for you. And probably not just for you, but for your family that's also along for the ride. Can you talk
Mhm.
about that a little bit, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So it is a very difficult mental journey. My mother was my biggest advocate. She always took me to the doctors, the dentist, the surgeries, all of the appointments. She did a lot of the work when I was very young to make sure that she
Mhm.
found a team of plastic surgeons and specialists in speech therapy. Because the hospital where I was born, back in the 70s, they didn't really know too much. They had some plastic surgeons, but they weren't experienced. So my mother did find specialist hospitals in New York City that I went to. So it was very difficult for her to just handle all the, be my advocate, handle all the medical issues, always fight for me, make sure I was getting care, while also raising my sister. My sister was 4 years younger than me, and so she
Mhm.
had to kind of balance it. My father, for him, he had a very difficult time accepting my birth. I remember he often tells me the story of when I was born, and he was in complete shock and denial and didn't know
Mhm.
what to do, and says, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? How can I love her? How what happened?" And he had a hard time accepting me because to him I wasn't perfect and I wasn't normal, and
Mhm.
his generation, the way his father was, if you didn't look like a normal child, you were just an aberration and could not be loved. Fortunately, he did come around over the
Mhm.
years. And for my mother, her first was when the doctors handed me to her and they told her what it was. Her first comment was, "Well, can we fix it?" And that's always been her attitude throughout my life, was just let's fix it. She treated me like I was normal. She told me I was normal, and
Mhm.
she
Aren't moms
led me to
great?
believe, yeah, they are. I mean, in some ways, I got my strength and my resilience from her, but in other ways, telling me and making me believe that I was normal like any other child actually made it harder because I couldn't understand why I was having all these surgeries, why I was being bullied, why I didn't look like the other children, yet I kept being told I was normal.
Mhm.
As a result, from the mental side of it, I actually denied that I was different. I denied having a cleft lip and palate. I pretended nothing was wrong, and that made it much more difficult for me mentally to accept my appearance. The bullying was nonstop. It was very, very intense, very terrible. It really, took its toll on me. But I learned to ignore it. I mean, literally just ignore it, shut it down, dissociate, pretend I didn't hear anything they were saying, as my mother taught me. As a result, for 47 years of my life, I refused to talk to anyone about my cleft. If you would have told me 5 years ago, I would be where I am now talking to you on a podcast about growing up with a cleft lip and palate, having give a TED talk in the advocacy work, I would have never believed you,
Mhm.
because that's how in denial I was. But, with a lot of work on myself, a lot of self-reflection, therapy, and just hard work, I overcame that denial to really accept who I am. But yeah, to get back to your original question, the mental health road is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I think you should give yourself a really big pat on the back, but don't strain anything. But um, and I've just been talking with my own therapist about all the stuff I've been through, and I used to think that it's all negative, like it's just a bunch of bad karma, and now I've sort of shifted to the opinion that all those negative things that happened to me were just preparatory work to get me to
Mhm,
where I am now, where I can turn all those negatives into hopefully a positive for other people. I
mhm.
think you're probably in the same situation.
Absolutely, yes. I realized I went to doing this advocacy work for several years. I realized that everything I've been through, my experiences, the bullying, the dark side of the mental health aspect of it, the lack of self-esteem, overcoming the obstacles, has all led me to where I am today. To be able to give back, to inspire others, to help support the cleft community, to help other people with a cleft lip and palate overcome the obstacles that they're enduring, whether they're children, teenager, or even adults, even in their late adults, later years in life, we still have those obstacles. So I see it as it was preparing me for now, for my work now, for being inspiring, being a coach, and doing the advocacy work that I do.
I forgot in your bio that you had done a TED Talk. Do you want to share about that experience? Because I'd love to
Mhm.
do a TED Talk. Hey, Ted, call
Absolutely.
me.
Absolutely. So, giving a TED Talk was one of the most exciting and, I guess, frightening things in my life. I've actually applied several times before I was accepted. As you know, they have a very specific requirement. The biggest issue for me was getting very clear on my call to action and getting very clear on that idea for spreading. And that's when my perseverance came in, and I didn't give up. I kept applying and I kept refining my message. It's a lot of hard work to give a TED Talk, I'm not gonna deny it, but it is so rewarding and exhilarating, and to be vulnerable and up on that stage for those 15 minutes that, believe it or not, felt like 15 hours,
Mhm.
to be so vulnerable and to share my story was I don't wanna it was a culmination of a dream, and I've always wanted to give a TED Talk. I just never thought the subject matter would be something so personal and something so vulnerable. But
Mhm.
looking back now, I'm glad it was, because I really got the opportunity to, share my story, spread the message, and educate and raise awareness about cleft lip and palate, and hopefully bring a little bit more inclusivity to those of us with different birth differences that maybe are not as well known.
Sure. So, was your TED Talk in New York, or did you go to one of the satellite cities? Or
No, actually, it was done by the University of Florida, so they hold a
okay.
TED conference every year, and that's where I applied. I applied to University of Florida, I applied to Jacksonville, and I applied to another location in Central Florida. So they have TED Talks at all different locales throughout the US that anybody can apply to. You just go on the website for the local TEDx organization that's put on usually by university or another organizer. You can apply to be a speaker, and they usually give you the criteria. So for me, it was very local. It was right here in town, where I live, because I live in Gainesville, University of Florida. So yeah, so it was very local. I didn't have to travel anywhere.
Oh, nice. I think I know a librarian at your university, but talk about that
Oh,
off
okay.
the air.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. So, have you had any other physical issues because of the palate? I mean, we talked about your hips and stuff like that. Is there
Hmm.
anything else? Because I know when you're dealing with the sinus and all that, there can be a lot of balance and, uh,
Hmm.
you know, keeping your ears pressurized and things like that.
Hmm.
And obviously, eating had to be very difficult.
Yes, yes, that's a great question. So, as a baby, I couldn't nurse or be bottle fed because I had too much opening, and the formula and the milk would come out my nose. And I also couldn't make a tight enough seal to suction from a bottle or from,
Sure.
breastfeeding. My mother often told me times that she was afraid that I was going to choke to death, because sometimes the milk would just go down my windpipe or come out my nose. There was a risk of malnourishment when I was younger, and there always is a
Mhm.
risk of malnourishment with babies born with a cleft, because sometimes they just physically cannot nurse or drink. I still cannot, I have trouble drinking through a straw. I can't blow up a balloon. I can't whistle, just because I don't have the ability, the flexibility in my upper lip.
Mhm.
Eating was very, very difficult. After every surgery, I was not allowed to use utensils for fear that I would rip the stitches in the roof of my mouth or undo the
Mhm.
work that they did. Or I didn't have enough teeth to bite into an apple or corn or things like that.
Mhm.
Even now, I still have some trouble. I get popcorn kernels, and sometimes when I eat fish and I don't scale it enough, I get fish scales stuck in the seam that's in the roof of my mouth. or sometimes I get stuck between the implants. So all these little issues. From an ear and hearing perspective, I do have hearing loss. I have to wear hearing aids. I
Mhm.
have sleep apnea because of all the scar tissue in my nose and my throat. As a child, I had to wear earplugs. If I got water in my ears, that was an almost instant ear infection.
Wow.
Part of my many surgeries was also having tubes in my ears because I didn't have proper drainage. So I had tubes in my ears as well. And I still have trouble with my ears in addition to the hearing loss. I went scuba diving about 3 years ago, something I always wanted to do. And
Oh, wow.
it did not turn out too well because of the depth and the pressure.
Mhm.
I thought I did permanent damage to my ears. Fortunately, it was just only short-term damage to the eardrum, but I got a stern warning from my doctor, my ear doctor, not to do anything like that again. So my dream of going skydiving is pretty much off my list, unfortunately. So yes, but I've learned to accept those issues as just part of who I am and part of life now.
Yeah, if you hadn't have mentioned that you have hearing impairment, I wouldn't have noticed from our conversation.
Hmm.
So,
Thank you.
so
Thank you. Well, I'm using the earbuds now, and I've learned to turn up the volume, and that helps. But I do wear hearing aids during the day, so that also helps overcome the hearing loss.
mhm. So in addition to all this physical trauma that you've overcome, you continued with your schooling despite the bullying, and
Hmm.
you got yourself a nice little doctorate.
Yeah, yes, I did. Um, Schooling was very difficult for me because my teachers didn't. They thought that because I had a facial difference, that also equated to a lack of mental intelligence. Some of the
Yeah.
teachers said I would never amount to anything. Some of them thought that because I missed so much school between speech therapy and the surgeries that I would fall behind. My biggest flaw is that I was terrible at math. Ironic, given that I had a long career as an accounting professor, but I've learned to overcome the math weakness. And I think almost everyone is terrible at math. But I love to learn, and that's where my determination and my perseverance came through. Is that just because the teachers told me I would not amount to anything, I said I'm not going to let that stop me. And I've always wanted to be a doctor ever since I was young. I love helping people. I love just giving of myself. And I wanted to be a doctor or a nurse, but I'll let a little secret. I'm terrified of needles.
Mhm.
Hospitals don't go well with me. It brings up the medical trauma triggers. And of course, being bad at math was not going to equate well for a medical doctor. So as I say, I'm still a doctor, just not a medical one.
Mhm. I think that's a fantastic achievement, and I think people in the audience, now that they know you're an accounting prof, probably going to help ask you for help with their taxes.
I welcome that.
Okay, so what's next for you? You've achieved all these goals. You've continued your education. You've conquered all these surgeries. What I guess more advocacy work is probably what
Mhm.
your future.
Absolutely, yes. So my future goals now are I want to continue to build the cleft community. I want to continue to educate. One of my main bucket list goals is I want cleft lip and palate to be as well known as Down syndrome. The birth statistics for Down syndrome is 1 in 700, which is the same statistics as cleft lip and palate worldwide. So 1 in 700 babies are either born with cleft lip and palate or Down syndrome. Everybody knows about Down syndrome. Even children are familiar with the characteristics of it or what it means. You mentioned Down syndrome, people know, they have a basic idea of it. You mentioned cleft lip and palate, or if you see someone like me, I've actually had dentists that were not familiar with my scars and they thought that I was injured or in an accident or something else until I said, no, I had a cleft lip and palate. And then they say, oh, yeah, I think I remember reading about that way back in dental school. And it just kind of, it's one of those things that lights my fire and makes me more passionate to say, okay, well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to change that and not let it be just something that these medical professionals heard about in medical school, but that they know about on a daily basis. They know what's involved. They know it's not a one and done surgery. It's a lifetime of
Mhm.
maintenance and management. And that's my ultimate goal is that if someone says cleft lip and palate, everybody knows what it means on a basic level.
So, are you involved in is there like a cleft palate association or other advocacy groups that people might become familiar with if they
Mhm.
want to, help? Oh, and I just got
Absolutely,
the
yes.
10-minute notice.
Okay, so I'll make this brief. I work with Smile Train, which is a global nonprofit organization. And what they do is they train medical professionals in undeveloped countries to perform cleft lip and palate surgeries. So, for example, in November of 2021 and July of this year, I went to Kenya in November 2021, and I went to Colombia in July of this year to see the work that they do, to see meet the hospitals where the surgeons and the doctors were trained to perform these surgeries so that the
Wow.
local residents, either children who are born with a cleft or even adults who have an untreated cleft, can go to the hospital and get the help that they need so that they don't have to continue to live with an unrepaired cleft. So the benefit is that they provide ongoing resources, sustainability, so that even future generations born with a cleft lip and palate can immediately get the care. They don't have to, endure not having that repaired cleft. My role with Smile Train is I actually work with them in a volunteer capacity as part of their committee that helps strengthen global communications and the cleft community within the United States. So they're a fabulous organization. They're nonprofit. They really continue the advocacy work, and I love what they're doing.
I guess the doctors who perform the surgeries and that are all doing it gratis.
Yeah, yes. Well, the patients don't have to pay. The doctors, um, I don't know if they're paid or if they're gratis, but I know that they are also local doctors. So when the patients go there, they're very comfortable. It's their own
Mhm.
culture, their own language. So they don't have to deal with a language barrier as well. So yeah, and I just love the sustainability model that they follow. It's kind of like the feed a man a fish model versus teach a man to fish.
Mhm. So I'm sorry, I missed the name of the group that you're affiliated with.
Hmm. Smile train.
The Smile Train. Okay.
Hmm.
So if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Smile Train, where can we direct them to?
Absolutely. So they can visit me on the internet at my website, christineerrico.com. I even have a newsletter they can sign up if they just want to get my ebook on how to feel more comfortable in their own skin, sharing some tips that I've learned to build their self-esteem and their self-acceptance. Smile Train is also, they can visit Smile Train at smiletrain.org. And I also have links to Smile Train on my website. I've done a couple of talks with Smile Train. They have annual conferences called CleftCon, where they continue to educate and share speakers about cleft lip and palate, both for parents of children with a cleft and for adults with a cleft. So they have their annual conference coming up in December of this year. It's going to be virtual online. It's all free. I don't think the registration is open yet, but it will in probably another month or two. And anybody can attend that. I've actually been a speaker in previous years. I'm going to be a speaker
Mhm.
again this year at it. And it's a fabulous way to learn more about cleft lip and palate and become involved with the community.
Yeah. So I'm also guessing if somebody who's listening to this or watching this would like to have you speak to their group, you'd be fairly happy to do that.
Absolutely, yes. I love public speaking. I am always open for future speaking engagements. I have a contact form on my website. They can send me an email or contact me with whatever questions they have. I would be open and happy to speak to any organizations or any group.
It's got to be such a, I'm trying to think of the right word, um, mind blowing to you, from as a child who didn't want to talk and felt you were different to becoming a professor when that's all you do is get up and talk and share knowledge with people, and then to a TED talk and doing all this advocacy work. It's just it's a 180, and that
It
it's
it
just got to be
absolutely
crazy.
is. It definitely is crazy. And there are many days when I wake up and I say, I ask myself how I got here, not in a kind of a dismayed or an exasperating feeling, but an inspirational and kind of being so grateful and thankful for how I got here, and to look back at where I came and realize that this is my true passion. This is where my heart lies. And this is what I love doing most. As
Mhm.
a child, I always struggled with my purpose in life, and then finding it now and realize this is what I love to do. Yeah, I never thought, like I said earlier, I would be a public speaker, but it comes so naturally to me now, and I just feel so alive when I do it. That's why I continue doing
Yeah, I guess you've got 25 years of not public speaking that's built up and you're just getting it out now.
it. Yes, I really do. I enjoy sharing my story, and I enjoy, at my heart, I'm still a teacher. I'm still that helping person. So that's how I see it. I'm helping people. I'm helping everyone with a facial difference, cleft lip and palate, by raising that awareness and by educating. So it kind of ties in with, my core of who I am.
Well, I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. As I mentioned to
Thank
you
you.
before, one of my neighbors, their child has gone through not as much as you have, but
Hmm.
and it's it's hard. I've never felt comfortable asking them, as we talked about before. So,
Hmm.
um, would you say most people with cleft are, sort of keeping it inside, or there's more people like you that would like to share or be asked
Hmm.
about it?
I think it's 50-50. I do know some people that are still in denial, not quite denial about the club, but they don't want to be part of the community. They feel that it's not who they are, it's not their identifier, and they want nothing to do with the community. Then there's people like myself and some of my friends and other people I know from the club community that want their story to be told. They want to continue to educate. They are actually, happy to share themselves in many ways. And then there's some people that are kind of in the middle. They're still on their journey to self-acceptance, because it is a path to self-acceptance. I had to go through all of the denial, the grief for the childhood I never had, and to get to where I am today. And so it is that journey, and there's a lot of people that are on that journey at different stages of being able to talk about it with their family and friends, to talk about it with coworkers, and then the general public. So if you do meet someone with a cleft lip and palate and you're curious, I would just say politely yes and say, can I talk to you, or can I ask you what happened? And
Mhm.
judge their reaction. They may be open, they may not, but you don't know until you ask. As a child, if someone asked me, I was very blunt, and I would just say, well, I was born this way, and that was it. I didn't
Mhm.
get offended if someone asked, but it was kind of tied in with, "Well, I'm not going to talk about it." Now, as you can see, I can talk your ear off about it.
Mhm. Well, I think what you've been through is amazing. How you've come out of it is amazing. And I applaud you for taking this very trying situation and turning it into such a positive for yourself and so many other
Mhm.
people. So, this is my least favorite uh, moment in a podcast when I have to tell you we have to wrap up.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
once again, could you tell people your website and how they can get a hold of you? And
Absolutely. So you can find me on the internet. My website is Christine Errico, ERRICO.com. So it's just my first and last name, ChristineErrico.com. I have a contact form. You can email me. I have some blog posts. I have a free ebook. And I'm also on Facebook, Coach Christine Errico. You can find me there as well. But I also have links to social media from my website. So I, welcome new subscribers to my newsletter. I send out tips about building self-confidence, self-esteem, self-acceptance. And I love to connect with people. So feel free to send me a message.
yes, people, you know where to get a hold of Christine now, so you have no excuse. Christine, thank you so much for being on the Dead Man Walking podcast. I'm repeatedly Dead Fred, and do what the cool kids tell you to do: like, subscribe, share, all those other things. And I hope to see you next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Fred. Have a good day.